Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a huge topic,
Yeah.
a kind of conceptual blueprint that a lot of people find intimidating, and we're going to make it practical.
We are. The goal for you listening is if you're trying to get smart, fast, and not just swallow information, but really understand it, then this is your roadmap.
Absolutely. We're not talking about what facts you should know. Instead, we're going much deeper. We're asking how you know anything at all.
We are diving into something called the theory of knowledge, or TOK. And, don't let the name fool you. This isn't some dusty, abstract philosophy course.
No, not at all. Think of it as like the ultimate user's manual for your own brain. It's a system for critical thinking designed to help you handle the absolute flood of information we all face every day.
Our mission today is really practical. We're going to pull out the core mental tools from the TOK framework. And this framework has some serious rigor behind it. It's pulling from cognitive science, from philosophy.
All to help you become what the framework calls a responsible knower. That's our goal for this deep dive. That's a destination.
And that journey really has to start with the idea of knowledge itself. At its core, TOK is what's called an epistemological inquiry.
Which is the fancy way of saying it's the study of knowledge, its nature, its limits, how we justify what we claim to know.
Exactly. The sources are really clear on this point. Knowledge is not a static list of facts you just download. It's dynamic, it's always changing, and it's shaped by all these complex factors, social, cultural, methodological.
So if you take a big claim, something like the global climate is warming, TOK doesn't just ask you to memorize that fact.
No, it pushes you to ask, okay, how did we justify that claim? What tools were used? What statistical models are in play? What cultural biases might be shaping how we're even interpreting that data?
Well,
And crucially, what's the limit of our certainty? How sure can we be?
that's the big shift, isn't it? Traditional school is all about content mastery. Can you repeat the fact back on a test?
Right. But DTOK forces that critical reflection. It asks how that piece of content, that fact, earned its status as knowledge in the first place, whether we're talking about science or history or even art.
And that process of thinking about your own thinking,
Yeah.
that's metacognition, right?
That's it. And it's probably the single most important skill you can have today for, just being an informed citizen in the world.
What I love about the framework is that even though this sounds massive and complicated, they boil it down. They give us three kind of analytical lenses or buckets we can use for any claim we encounter.
They do. It's very elegant. The first is what they call the ways of knowing, or WOUKs. These are the tools inside your head. Your reason, emotion, memory, language.
It's cognitive processes.
Exactly. Then the second is the areas of knowledge, the AOKs. This is where knowledge is produced out in the world. So, the natural sciences, mathematics, history, each with its own rule book.
And the third lens, which is maybe the most important one, is the knower. Me, my personal identity, my culture, my perspective. These aren't just little details. They're fundamental to how I process everything. They shape what I even think is plausible.
They really do.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I
Yeah.
think we have to start right there at the absolute center of the framework. The idea of the situated knower. This feels crucial for understanding why we disagree so much today.
It is absolutely central. The core idea is that all knowledge is situated. And what that means is you're not a purely objective, disembodied brain just neutrally observing the world.
Right, I'm not a camera.
You're not a camera. You are an embodied, encultured, historically located person. Your background, your environment, your identity, all of it fundamentally shapes what you even notice, let alone how you interpret it.
So the very first tool for anyone listening is this. Before you even look at a piece of information, you have to acknowledge your own filter. And this idea naturally sets up this key distinction they make between personal and shared knowledge.
Yes. Let's start with personal knowledge. This is the stuff that's grounded in your direct individual experience. Your skills, your memories, your gut feelings.
Your intuition.
Right. And what's really interesting about a lot of personal knowledge is that it's often tacit. That means it's incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible to put into words.
What's an example of that?
Think of a master chef who just knows when a sauce is right by the smell and the texture, or a surgeon who can recognize a problem on site based on a pattern they've seen thousands of times before. They can't write a perfect instruction manual for it. It's embodied knowledge.
It's in their hands, in their senses. And that knowledge is so deeply shaped by your own unique life path, isn't it? If you've personally lived through a major political upheaval, your interpretation of a news story about a protest is going to be profoundly different from someone who's only read about it in a book.
Your history is a non-negotiable filter. It's always on. Now, contrast that with shared knowledge. This is the stuff that's collectively produced and vetted and maintained by a community.
So this is the official stuff.
This is the official stuff. Scientific theories, legal codes, religious doctrines, a country's founding myths. It's formalized, it's written down, it's passed on through institutions like universities, courts, or churches. Peer review in science is a great example of a mechanism for creating shared knowledge.
And the really fascinating part is the push and pull between the two. Shared knowledge can't move forward without personal knowledge.
Never. It's always an individual, a scientist with a weird hunch, an artist with a new vision who pushes the boundary. That personal insight, if it survives scrutiny, can eventually get formalized and change the shared knowledge for everyone.
But that tension can be really difficult. I mean, think about when your own deeply held moral intuition, that gut feeling that something is just wrong, clashes with a shared ethical framework like a law or a company policy.
Or when your family's oral history about an event is completely different from what's in the official history textbooks. Navigating that conflict, that requires real intellectual and emotional work.
So beyond just personal versus shared, let's talk about perspective, because the framework is clear. It's not a passive thing. It's an active filter.
It's absolutely active. Your perspective is this mix of your training, your language, your identity. The sources make a great point that your professional training literally changes what you see as relevant data.
How so?
Well, imagine a financial analyst, a sociologist, and an urban planner all looking at the same city block. They are not seeing the same thing. The analyst sees investment opportunities. The sociologist sees community dynamics. The planner sees traffic flow and zoning issues. Their training primes them to look for completely different things.
And culture is a huge part of that priming. Culture doesn't just give us facts. It shapes how we even go about knowing things. It sets our priorities.
Completely. If your culture, like much of Western science, deeply values empirical, testable, individual verification, it's going to prioritize a certain kind of evidence.
But another system, say, many indigenous knowledge systems, might prioritize relationality, community consensus, and a holistic understanding of an ecosystem. Their methods and their definition of what counts as justified knowledge will be totally different.
And that comparison is so important because it reveals that any cultural priority will inevitably create epistemic blind spots.
Blind spots.
Yeah. By privileging one way of knowing, you automatically downplay or even marginalize others. We see this all the time in history, where the official narrative often reflects the interests of the dominant group, and the stories of others are silenced or distorted. It's a form of gatekeeping knowledge.
Which brings us right to identity and values. Your identity, your gender, your language, your socioeconomic class, it shapes your focus.
And your values, your core beliefs about what is good or important, they act as a powerful lens for assessing evidence. Think about a debate over a new public health policy. The scientific data might be available to everyone, but how you weigh the value of individual liberty against the value of collective safety, that's a value judgment. It's not in the data itself.
So we've established the knower is complicated, situated, biased. Now let's get into the actual tools we use to think.
This is where we jump into the ways of knowing, the go case. And for anyone listening, the big insight here, the takeaway, is that every single mental tool you rely on, even the ones you trust the most, has built-in systematic flaws.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the way we trust our own minds is often deeply flawed. Let's start with the one we think is foolproof. Reason.
And of course, reason is absolutely central. It's how we conduct rigorous inquiry. We use deductive logic in math to get certainty. We use inductive reasoning in science to find probabilities. It's the engine of explanation.
Well, yeah. There's a huge but here. All the modern work in cognitive psychology from people like Kahneman and Tversky shows that fundamentally, we're kind of lazy thinkers.
We are. The problem usually isn't that our logic is broken. The problem is we feed our reasoning process faulty inputs because of these things called cognitive biases.
And this all comes from the dual process model, right? System 1 and System 2 thinking.
That's the one. System 1 is your fast, intuitive, automatic brain. It's the gut reaction. System 2 is the slow, deliberate, analytical thinking that takes real effort. The problem is we live most of our lives in System 1 to save energy. And it uses these mental shortcuts or heuristics that lead to predictable errors.
Give us a concrete example. How does this trip someone up in their daily life?
Okay, take the availability heuristic. This is our tendency to overestimate the importance of information that is easily available to us. So if you see 3 news reports about shark attacks in a week, your System 1 brain screams, sharks are a huge danger. You might even cancel a beach trip.
Even though statistically you're more likely to be injured by, I don't know, a falling coconut.
Exactly. Your reasoning is hijacked by the vivid, emotionally charged, available story, not the actual data. Or think about confirmation bias, which is maybe the most dangerous one. We don't just passively receive information, we actively hunt for evidence that confirms what we already believe and ignore anything that challenges it.
We're all building our own little filter bubbles in our heads long before the internet does it for us.
We absolutely are.
Wow. That's a sobering thought. Okay, moving on to another way go, emotion. For centuries, we were basically taught that emotion is the enemy of good reason.
And that's just far too simple. The modern understanding is that emotion is indispensable. You can't have good judgment without it. How do you make a moral decision without empathy or compassion?
Right.
Emotion is what motivates inquiry in the first place. The sense of wonder that drives a scientist or the feeling of elegance a mathematician gets from a proof. It's foundational to our values.
So if it's so essential, what's the limitation? Where's the danger?
The danger is distortion. Powerful emotions can lead to irrational commitments and prejudice. Fear, for example, can cause us to wildly miscalculate risk. Anger can make us seek simple black and white solutions to complex problems. Emotion acts as a filter on our perception, and we're often not even aware it's happening. We have to be so vigilant about emotional appeals in politics and advertising.
Next up, memory. We rely on it for everything. Our identity, our skills, our entire life story.
And its strength is obvious. Without it, there's no learning, no continuity of self. But the fundamental insight from psychology is that memory is not a video recording. It's not an archive you just pull a file from.
It's, what did the source say? Reconstructive.
It is reconstructive. Every time you recall a memory, you are actively rebuilding it. And in that rebuilding process, you can fill in gaps with new information, with suggestions from others, or with what you currently believe to be true.
Can you give us a really stark example of this?
Absolutely. The research on flashbulb memories is fascinating. These are your memories of hearing about a major public event like 9/11 or the fall of the Berlin Wall. People report these memories with incredible vividness and extremely high confidence, even years later.
I can picture exactly where I was for some of those.
We all can. But when researchers track people over time, they find that the details of these unforgettable memories change dramatically. People misremember where they were, who told them, what they were doing. They've unconsciously woven in details they heard later. It's a powerful illustration of how fallible our memory really is.
That's terrifying. Okay, what about language? It's the vehicle for almost all our shared knowledge.
It is. It's the medium, but it's also the structure for our thought.
Yeah.
The words we have shape the concepts we can form. The philosopher Wittgenstein had this idea of language games, that the meaning of a word isn't in a dictionary, it's in how it's used by a community in a specific context.
And specialized language, jargon, gives incredible precision to fields like law or medicine.
It does. But that precision is the double-edged sword. It's also a powerful gatekeeper. If you don't speak the language of finance, you're locked out of that conversation.
Right.
And then there's just the inherent ambiguity of language. This becomes a huge problem in translation. A concept like justice or freedom doesn't have a perfect one-to-one equivalent in every culture, which makes something like negotiating an international treaty incredibly difficult.
And we have to touch on imagination here, too, which is often seen as, less serious than reason.
But it's absolutely critical for knowledge. Imagination is what allows us to think about possibilities beyond what we can immediately see or touch. It's the engine of hypothesis in science. Einstein's greatest breakthroughs came from his Gedanken experiment, his thought experiments. He imagined chasing a beam of light.
So imagination is crucial for generating new ideas.
But, and this is the key limitation, it has to be disciplined. It has to be checked against reality, against logic or evidence. Unchecked imagination leads to conspiracy theories and delusion.
Right. Okay, next woke is intuition, that gut feeling.
We tend to romanticize intuition, but TOK gives us a very precise way to think about it. Intuition is just rapid, non-conscious pattern recognition.
So it's not magic.
It's not magic. It's expertise. In fields with clear rules and massive amounts of repetition, intuition is incredibly reliable. A grandmaster chess player sees the right move. An expert radiologist spots the tumor. Their brains have processed so many patterns that the judgment is instantaneous.
So where does it go wrong?
It goes wrong the second you step outside that narrow domain of expertise. The brilliant chess player's intuition about the stock market is worthless. The successful entrepreneur's gut feeling about foreign policy is probably just a guess. The danger is overconfidence, assuming your intuition is reliable everywhere.
And finally, the framework also includes faith as a way of knowing.
It does, and it treats it with respect. It includes faith because for billions of people, it provides a comprehensive framework for understanding the world, for making moral choices, and for finding meaning. It's a system of knowledge based on commitment and trust that often transcends the need for empirical evidence.
So TOK doesn't try to prove or disprove faith claims.
Not at all. It just analyzes faith traditions as powerful and legitimate knowledge systems that shape human understanding and action.
That is a fantastic overview of the mental toolkit, the WOKs. So now we move to where this knowledge gets made. The areas of knowledge, or AOKs.
This is a really important shift. We've talked about how we know. Now we're looking at the different disciplines and their specific rules of the game. Each AOK has its own methods, its own standards of proof, its own idea of what certainty even looks like.
Let's start with the one many people see as the benchmark, the natural sciences. Biology, chemistry, physics.
Their whole enterprise is built on the foundation of empirical testing. You observe the world, you form a hypothesis, you test it. The core value, which the philosopher Karl Popper championed, is falsifiability.
Right. This is such a cool idea. Science doesn't work by proving theories true.
It can't, really. It works by relentlessly trying to prove them false. A theory is only considered strong because it has survived every attempt to knock it down. That's what gives us confidence in it provisionally.
But it's always provisional because
Yeah.
we have these huge shifts in science.
Exactly. That's Thomas Kuhn's idea of the paradigm shift. Science isn't just a slow, steady accumulation of facts. Every once in a while, the entire worldview gets overthrown. Think about the jump from Newton's physics to Einstein's relativity. It wasn't just adding a new equation, it was a fundamental rethinking of space, time, and gravity.
And even today, we're seeing challenges. The sources talk about the reproducibility crisis. What does that tell us?
It's a huge deal. It's the finding that many published scientific studies, especially in fields like psychology and medicine, can't be replicated by other scientists. It's a stark reminder that even with the scientific method, bias can creep in, statistics can be misused, and objectivity is a goal you have to constantly fight for, not a given.
Okay, so from the natural sciences, let's move to the human sciences. Psychology, economics, sociology. They're studying a much messier subject.
Infinitely messier. Because the human beings, can think back. They are self-aware. If you tell people the results of a study about their behavior, they might change their behavior, which messes up your study.
The observer effect, but on a grand scale.
A grand scale. So human scientists have to use a mix of methods. They use quantitative data, like surveys and statistics, but they also have to rely heavily on interpretation, on qualitative methods like interviews and ethnography to understand meaning and context.
And the risk of researcher bias must be enormous.
It is. You're studying the very thing you are a part of. It's almost impossible to establish the kind of clean, universal causal laws that you can in physics. The findings are almost always culturally specific and value-laden.
Let's pivot to history. So many people think history is just about memorizing what happened.
And that's completely wrong. History is an act of interpretation. It's about critically evaluating sources. A historian looks at a document and has to ask, who wrote this? Why? Who was their audience? What biases did they have? It's detective work.
And then they have to weave it into a story, a narrative.
And that's the key. History is a narrative construction.
Yeah.
And any narrative involves choices, what to include, what to exclude, what to emphasize. This is why historical accounts are always vulnerable to the structural silences we talked about earlier.
The voices that were left out.
The voices that were left out, the perspectives that weren't recorded. The archives themselves reflect the power structures of the time. That's why history is constantly being rewritten as we find new evidence or as our contemporary values lead us to ask new questions of the past.
Okay, now for a big one, mathematics. For many, this is the one area where we can find absolute certainty.
And in a way, that's true. Math is built on axioms, foundational assumptions, and it uses deductive proof. If your axioms are true and your logic is valid, your conclusion is guaranteed to be true. It's a closed logical system.
But there's a huge philosophical debate, isn't there? Is math discovered like a feature of the universe, or is it invented by the human mind?
That's the eternal question. And it get even more complicated with Gödel's incompleteness theorems in the 20th century.
Right. What did he show, in simple terms?
He essentially showed that any formal mathematical system that is powerful enough to be interesting cannot be both complete and consistent. There will always be true statements within that system that cannot be proven by the system's own rules. It was a bombshell. It shattered the dream of a single, perfect, complete system of mathematics.
And even if pure math is certain, the second you apply it to the real world, like in an economic model or a climate projection,
It becomes messy. It's only as good as the data you feed it and the assumptions you make. A brilliant financial model can fail catastrophically because it makes a faulty assumption about rational human behavior. The certainty of the math doesn't protect you from the uncertainty of the real world.
we should also quickly mention the arts and ethics as knowledge areas.
Yes. The arts give us a different kind of knowledge. It's not about factual propositions. It's about emotional insight, empathy, understanding another perspective, challenging our assumptions. It's experiential knowledge.
And ethics.
Ethics is about moral reasoning. It's the systematic inquiry into questions of right and wrong, good and bad. It gives us frameworks like focusing on consequences or duties or character to help us justify our moral judgments and navigate disagreement.
Finally, we need to spend a moment on indigenous knowledge systems. This feels like a really important addition to the traditional list of AOKs.
It's absolutely critical for what's called knowledge pluralism. Indigenous systems challenge some of the core assumptions of Western science. They often emphasize relationality, the idea that everything is interconnected. Knowledge isn't a collection of separate facts, but an understanding of the web of relationships between humans, animals, and the land.
And it's often transmitted differently, right?
Yeah.
Not through textbook.
Right. It's transmitted through oral traditions, through ceremony, through story. It's often land-based and holistic. And very importantly, knowledge is often seen as something you have a responsibility to, not just something you own. There are protocols around who can share what knowledge.
So it's not just another interesting perspective. It's a fundamental challenge to the idea that there's only one valid way to produce knowledge.
Exactly. It's crucial for decolonizing our thinking and for recognizing that diverse ways of knowing are essential for tackling complex global problems, especially environmental ones.
Okay. We've built the whole structure. We have the situated knower, we have the flawed mental tools, the WOBUKs, and we have the different disciplinary rule books, the AOKs. Now we need to bring it all together. How do we use this to be better learners, better citizens?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the real payoff. The ultimate goal of this entire framework is to help create the responsible knower for our complex digital world. Because knowing isn't just a passive activity, it's a moral one. It comes with responsibilities.
And that means we have to actively cultivate certain intellectual character traits. They call them epistemic virtues.
That's right. These are like habits of mind. First and foremost is intellectual humility, truly recognizing the limits of your own knowledge, acknowledging that you might be wrong.
That's a hard one for a lot of people.
It's the hardest one. Then there's intellectual courage, the willingness to seriously consider evidence that contradicts your deepest beliefs, to risk being proven wrong.
And then there's open-mindedness, which is more than just listening.
Much more. It's fair-mindedness. It's the discipline of engaging with an opposing argument in its strongest possible form, not just knocking down a weak caricature of it. A responsible knower actively seeks out the best arguments against their own position.
So when we talk about responsibility, that quickly gets us into the topic of power. Knowledge and power they're inseparable.
They're completely intertwined. What a society counts as legitimate knowledge shapes who has power. This is why we have to critically examine the authority of experts. We have to trust experts, doctors, scientists, engineers, to function. But TOK teaches us to ask, on what basis is their authority granted? What are their methods? Who funds them? Is there a consensus?
It's about trust, but verify. This also connects to the gatekeeping of knowledge, how power is used to control the flow of information.
Censorship is the most blatant form, but it can be much more subtle. Who gets research funding? Which studies get published in prestigious journals? Which historical narratives are taught in schools? These are all forms of gatekeeping that determine what ideas make it into the domain of shared knowledge.
And this leads to a really powerful and frankly disturbing concept from the source material, epistemic injustice.
This is a profound ethical idea. It's when someone is wronged, specifically in their capacity as a knower. The framework breaks it into two main types. The first is testimonial injustice.
What's that?
That's when you dismiss someone's testimony, you don't believe them, because of a prejudice you hold against their identity. So you might discount a woman's account of a technical problem because of sexism, or dismiss a person's story because of their accent or race. Their knowledge is unfairly rejected.
And the second type, hermeneutical injustice. That sounds more structural.
It is much deeper. Hermeneutical injustice happens when a person or a group lacks the words, the very concepts, to make sense of their own experience because the dominant culture hasn't created them yet.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Before the concepts of sexual harassment or gaslighting were developed and entered our shared vocabulary, people who experienced those things struggled to even articulate what was happening to them. They were suffering a harm they literally didn't have a name for, which made it almost impossible to have their personal knowledge recognized.
Wow. And all of these ethical issues are just put on steroids by technology, by what the source calls the infosphere.
Completely. The digital world is where we do our knowing now, and it raises enormous ethical questions. When an algorithm makes a decision about your loan application or parole hearing or what news you see, who is accountable when it gets it wrong?
The programmer.
The company that owns the AI.
Who is responsible?
Mhm.
The problem is often algorithmic bias. The AI systems are trained on historical data, and if that data reflects existing human biases, well, the algorithm learns those same biases and then applies them at a massive scale and speed.
Garbage in, garbage out. But it's worse. It's injustice in, injustice out, and amplified. This is why digital literacy is no longer a nice-to-have skill. It's essential. TOK's answer to this is to cultivate epistemic vigilance.
What does that look like in practice for someone scrolling through their phone?
It means slowing down. It means engaging your slow System 2 brain. It means asking, why is this content making me feel so angry or scared? Is it designed to do that? It's about consciously scrutinizing your own emotional reactions and an information source before you accept it, and especially before you share it.
Ultimately, this whole framework seems designed to create better lifelong learners. That metacognition, thinking about your thinking, it feels like a superpower.
It is, because it gives you the intellectual core to connect all the different subjects you learn. It fosters what they call integrative thinking. You can't understand a problem like climate change just through a scientific lens. You need the economic lens, the historical lens, the ethical lens. TOK gives you the framework to pull them all together.
It's the exact opposite of siloed thinking. It prepares you for the real world, which is messy and complex and doesn't fit into neat academic boxes.
It prepares you to be a thoughtful, reflective, and ethically aware person in a world that is just saturated with information and misinformation.
So what does this all mean?
It means we've just surveyed this incredible framework, the theory of knowledge. We've seen that knowledge isn't simple, it's dynamic, it's situated. We've dissected our own mental tools, our reason, memory, emotion, and seen their strengths, but more importantly, their inherent flaws. And we've looked at how different disciplines, from science to history, have their own unique ways of justifying claims.
And most critically, we've put it all inside an ethical framework. The goal isn't just to be smart, it's to be a responsible knower, to practice intellectual humility, to have the courage to change your mind, and to be vigilant against the ways power and bias can distort what we accept as truth.
You're now equipped to do more than just question a fact. You can question the entire process behind that fact. And that ability to analyze the justification, not just the claim, is what lets you navigate ambiguity and disagreement with real intellectual confidence.
So to leave you with a final thought to chew on, something that builds on this tension between trust and our own responsibility. The sources stress this need for critical scrutiny of the authority of experts. But we can't be experts in everything. We have to trust others to function. So here's the question. As opaque AI systems increasingly become the experts that filter our world, from our news feeds to medical advice, how do you balance the necessary trust you have to place in these automated systems with your fundamental epistemic duty to remain vigilant, to check sources, and to challenge the assumptions built into the code?
That tension between the need to trust and the duty to question isn't just a classroom exercise anymore. It's at the heart of nearly every important decision you have to make.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you some tools to start questioning how you know what you know.
Until next time, stay reflective and stay curious.